I mean, we don't hear from him, but we do get a sense of Lord Peters being a little bit annoyed with what's happened today with farmers saying, we will take the sugar hit, please. Cash now, please. Give it to us, give it to us, give it to us.
Fonterra shareholders have voted overwhelmingly to sell its global consumer businesses, including the Anchor and Mainland brands. 88% of farmer shareholder votes favoured the sale to French dairy giant Lactalis for $4.22 billion. It means they'll each get a payday averaging around $300,000. But Winston Peters says it's a short-sighted sugar hit. Adam Hollingworth reports.
Mid-Canterbury dairy farmer Jeff Spark voted yes to selling the brands. For him, it was a no-brainer.
At the end, it was pretty compelling that for the best long-term interests of the co-op, we're better without the consumer business and focus on the ingredients in the food service business, which is what we really accelerate at.
Spark, like most others in the Fonterra cooperative, want to reap the benefits from their investment to carry out repairs and maintenance and generally play catch-up.
We'll use that capital to repay some debt and perhaps look to improve infrastructure on farm and also look for some deferred R&M, spend it back into the business.
At a meeting of the shareholders,
there's always that thing about selling public entities versus keeping. I know it's not quite the same, but I'm not anti-asset sales, full stop. It's devil is in the details thing. What do you get for it? And I remember when we sold off 49% of Air New Zealand and 49% of this power company and did it under John Key, they were using it to upgrade hospitals, to paint schools. Like there was this list of things that were a 20-year cycle of jobs that needed to be done. And so I was like, well, this is a terrible idea because in 50 years from now, you're going to need to do all these things again and you're not going to have the asset to leverage against or borrow against because you've sold it, you've used the cash on if nothing else, a depreciating asset, if not an asset that's going to end up just falling over like paint on a wall, and you've given up an asset for that rather than borrowing against it. And this feels a bit the same. It feels like 300k right now, let's take the sugar hit, let's get it in there, and then you've lost the asset. Whereas, I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of farmers, borrowing that 300k and doing the work with it versus not giving up the asset seems, I don't know, I'll say feels because I'm not a farmer, but feels like the smarter financial idea. I think all of us, if we could, this is going to make us sound like property inspectors, property investors ourselves, but most people, if they could, would keep a house and buy another one because you'd build it and build into it. But most of us can't do that. Most of us have to sell the house to buy the next house because that's how most of us live. It feels like Fonterra had the ability to keep the house and sell and buy again, but they've chosen, even though they could have afforded the financial transaction, to sell the house and then buy the new house. Do you know what I mean? Does it make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to comment on the fact that you should always be very wary if you're going to use the term, it was a no-brainer. Because, that could mean that it was a really obvious decision. It could also mean that no one had any brains in their head when they made the decision.
Well, they said it was supported by 88% of respondents and 80% of farmers responded. So 0.88% of 80, that means it's 70% of the actual farmers approved it. So that's a pretty big overall swing. If 20% didn't actually respond, 88% of 80 is 70. So that's a fairly overwhelming. Now, is it overwhelming because it was the best financial decision? I guess I can't speak to that. Or is it overwhelming because they needed that sugar hit because we're in a terrible economy because of this government? So they're selling to get some money to look after themselves in this bad economy, or the government, or at least one part of it, Winston Peters, is saying you shouldn't be selling. Government saying don't sell. One part of the government saying don't sell, and they're having to sell because of the government because of the economy that this government is creating. There's a pretty vicious cycle in there somewhere, if you know what I mean. All right, we'll keep going.
This morning, Chairman Peter McBride recommended the sale, allowing Fonterra to concentrate on business-to-business options.
This gives us choices. We choose to focus on B2B ingredients and food service because we have a proven competitive advantage and global reach. We are confident this is the best option for our farmers' futures and therefore New Zealand.
Carl Dean, who chairs the dairy arm of Federated Farmers, said the $300,000 payout may sound like a lot, but farms are big businesses with big debts.
Some of these farms will have, $4 to $6 million of debt. So $300,000 sounds a lot, but it's still, just chunks of a little bit of a 3 or a 5 year payment on the debt repayments.
Fonterra says the shareholders gave it a strong mandate, but Winston Peters opposed the move, posting on X, "This is utter madness. It's economic self-sabotage. This is an outrageous, short-sighted sugar hit that is just giving away New Zealand's added value to a company from a major EU country. There is now no long-term security for New Zealand's farmers."
And the farmers have spoken, so Winston can have his decision or his opinion, but at the end of the day, farmers own the co-op, and we've made an informed view to divest.
ASB economist Nick Tuffley says the brands Fonterra are selling were never the money spinners they'd hoped for. The consumer business was only about 20% of revenue.
Look, it is a trade-off. I think the challenge is that if it was easy to make that a very profitable business, Fonterra would have found a way to do it by now. And the reality is that perhaps you do need a lot more capital coming in to help lift it up.
Despite some people's misgivings, economists hope we'll all benefit from the billions flushing through the economy.
Farmers will probably save or pay down debt with, perhaps somewhere around give or take half of it. Even then, we still see about $4.5 billion of activity being stimulated by this. So farmers will invest on the farm, they'll spend money on themselves, that will flow money through to other industries.
Fonterra expects the deal to be finalised in the first half of next year, pending regulatory approvals and the separation of the Mainland Group businesses from Fonterra.
There you go. There's the story, Chewie. Winston says, no. It's one of those things that you kind of go... I've had this conversation with people recently, and I'm sorry to bring it back to house sales, but they're the kind of assets that I sort of understand a bit more, having owned houses, is that like a newly married couple that both bring a house into a relationship, do you sell them both and buy a new one and live more comfortably, or do you keep both and stretch yourself and then try and have some assets to sell for your retirement sort of thing? And there's like a make life easier by selling the places and buying again, which feels like taking the cash is doing that, or making life harder for a better payoff down the road. Now, again, I don't know the dairy industry. I'm not saying this would do that, but it just feels a little bit like, taking the easy hit now for some extra cash rather than the harder run for more money. Now, you said at the start that you felt a bit sick because you were agreeing with Winston Peters. Why don't you explain to us why?
He's a terrible, terrible man, Pat. Because Winston's whole thing is being populist and being nationalist.
Oh.
Yeah, Winston's wizened, dusty old hole. It's being nationalist and populist. Now, that's not necessarily a good foundation to make a statement on. My gut feeling is that the selling something that New Zealanders have created to an overseas multinational just doesn't sound like a good idea. But I also understand that that is a nationalist position. Ordinarily, I should be all for the decisions of a co-op. Co-ops are a very socialist thing. And look, these guys have made a business decision. Is this more of a reflection that New Zealand has a tendency to put all of our eggs, or in this case butter, in the one basket? That we leverage one thing that we do very, very well as a cornerstone of our economy.
Yeah.
And now we're putting it in the hands of somebody else and putting a brand that we've created. Now, Fonterra, they themselves say, we don't want to concentrate on brands or products anymore. We just want to be a raw ingredient supplier. I don't know if that's a good business decision. It doesn't feel like a good one.
Yeah. Well, again, it's that there's a couple of things, right? The first is I don't know the dairy industry, I don't know the farming industry, so I can't speak to it. And also, who are we to say don't take the money when some of these farmers might be struggling and desperately need the money? One of the farmers on the TV1 story, which I watched, said something like they're basically just going to put that money aside for when times are tough. You know, if you've got a drought or something like that, that's what they're sort of using it for. And I guess the flip side to this whole conversation is who are we to say to them, this is what's best for you, when they might really just need the sugar hit now. Maybe they're halfway through their marathon and they really need that sugary hit right now to get them to the end. I don't know.